think for yourself and go with what you know you want to do. Don't suppress what you know in your heart you want to do. Is something that I would tell my teenage self for sure.
I will run, I will rise, I will grow like the world's never known.
Back to another episode of Evolutional One, where I talk with artists and creators around how to make decisions in crafting the life that they have. And this episode, I'm really excited to have you see one of my friends, Elle, that I met recently, who is just wonderful. She is, and you'll see as you get to the episode, there's so many parallels between my viewpoints and aesthetics and a lot of things that parallel with her thinking. And she is just such a delightful person in every aspect that you meet her. Just so friendly and kind and open. She describes herself as a business founder. So she's been starting businesses over the last, I think, decade is what she was talking about. But she's also just someone that I've come to like really respect their aesthetic and style and personality. Who they are is so incredible. And it was a pleasure to be able to have a minute to be able to talk with her. And I can't wait for you to dig in. There's so many things that I didn't even get to because she's one of those people that I think I could, just be friends with. And every time we meet, we could just have more conversations on different things. She's just such a wonderful person. So here is the conversation that I have with Elle. All right. So first off, thanks for taking the time to come and chat. And we really don't know each other. We've just, met through weird circumstances, but just coming across your stuff, I just wanted to say, been really impressed and inspired by at least the public way that you kind of present yourself. And I think there's a cross between you and I in the minimalism and intentional living, and there's a lot of stuff that we'll kind of get into, but I'm excited to have this conversation. To start off, I just wanted to have like an intro into who you are and what you do and kind of a little bit of a background.
Sure. Thank you firstly for having me. I can't wait to talk minimalism and actually how we met, the app that we met through as well. But first up, I'm Elle. I live in Bournemouth, which is on the south coast of the UK, right at the very bottom. Here in Bournemouth, I'm a business founder. I've founded a number of businesses over the last decade or so. I define myself as a minimalist, and I'm almost ready to define myself as a musician as well. Ultimately, at the crux of everything I do is a keenness and enthusiasm to connect with good people doing good stuff and connect those good people with each other, whether that sits in business, music, any creative community. That's really what the baseline of what I do is. So
I love that, connecting good people. I'm curious more on like the background in like growing up. What was home like, life? Did you always kind of identify as a creator, or what was that like, that initial starting point?
Not ever, or never did I define myself as creative. I grew up in an environment that was really academic. Academia was what was the thing that I should do. It was the path that my parents had followed. It was a path my brother was following as well. And in my mind, of course, I know it's not true now, but you couldn't be both. You're either creative or academic. And academia was really praised at home and creativity not so much. So no, in short, definitely never saw myself as a creative. I was kind of an anxious child, worrying about adult things, kind of quiet, but also had this kind of fiery independence. I didn't really relate to my peer group or my age group that much. And so from kind of late teenage years, I was pretty adamant that I was going to work for myself, do things on my own. And that's what I did for a really long time. I was kind of, Miss Independent, traveling on my own, starting stuff on my own, which was great and satisfied that independent itch. But only in the past few years have I kind of really learned the power of people. And that's where this kind of desire, the floodgates have been opened in terms of connecting with amazing people, learning from other people, broadening my horizons, but also being able to connect. I had this conversation with this person, these two would really get on. That surpasses all joy that I've derived from anything I was doing on my own. So from really being quite square, quite kind of living between constraints, expectations, academia, to starting businesses, which was kind of one foot into the next lane, but kind of straddling both lanes. And then a few years ago to go, oh, actually, I am creative. I do enjoy it. And I've found the value of people. I was then kind of only stepping over into that other lane fully a couple of years ago. That's not really a nutshell answer, but I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. One of the things that I want to really like hover on that you talked about is growing up. Because I definitely connected with this when you said it. Feeling like it was a or world, right? Like you're academia or creative, and that's definitely the impression that I kind of got growing up too. Was you have to pick something that you are. And I don't think it was never. You might agree with this or disagree, but it was never like told to me you have to be one thing. It was just it was implied. It was a subtle implication through everything that, don't do art, you'll never be an artist. Never mind the fact that how art influences all these other pieces. Like, that wasn't, but to me, like growing up and as a kind of a similar story to you getting older, recognizing that it's an and world, that two opposing things can actually coexist at one time. I wrote about this in a previous magazine that I did. The title of it, or not the title, but the crux was the duality of human nature. That you could be two opposing things at one time. Like you could be happy and sad, like both things. I mean, it doesn't even have to be two. Like it's multiple feelings can live inside of you at one time. And that idea was like, kind of like mind expanding for me. And I think that's what I'm hearing from you too, is growing up, there's almost like a closeness to how we expect the world to be. And then once you kind of turn that switch, it really opens up to so many different possibilities when you say like, oh, I'm creative and really like business and like music, and they can all coexist and work independently. Like, I don't know. I really connected with what you were kind of talking about.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. And I think it was, there are moments that I remember where I was kind of explicitly told, no, you can't do music. Or there was some kind of quip made about it. From my parents. My dad's quite cutting with his opinions sometimes. And as a child, you're always trying to judge like where you fit into the world and, what is the view on X, Y, and Z. And of course you soak up what your parents think. So I definitely agree with that. When you're talking then about feeling, you can feel happy and sad at the same time. It's like two sides of a coin. But I think growing up, it was like always feeling around, trying to find the boundaries of where you should be and what you should be doing. And school was kind of like that. Nobody explicitly said you can't do this, but like the music department, they knew the students that were really good at music and they focused all their attention on them. So if you weren't in that group, or you weren't recognized by the teacher, you perhaps didn't get the same attention. And same with sport as well. If you weren't known to be like the best, or the top kind of 5 athletes, or in the hockey team or whatever, that's where the teacher's attention went. And I suppose it was scary as a youngster to kind of, or was for me, to kind of put myself forward and go, actually, I want to be in that top group, or not even a top group, but I want to be kind of recognized. I want some of your attention. I want to learn what they're learning. So yeah, two points there that I can definitely agree with and relate to.
And so growing up, do you have siblings? Are you only child? What was where do you fit in that line?
I have an older brother. He's 7 years older than me, and reflecting personally, but also talking to my parents as well. When I said earlier I had those kind of adult worries, and how I couldn't necessarily relate to my peers and my age group. We've talked about this idea that actually the home wasn't really tailored to a child. By the time my brother was an older teenager, those formative years for me weren't in a home that was appropriate for like a 10-year-old. The conversation was very adult, the topics of conversation, the debates, the nature of things that my parents read and watched on TV, and that they could kind of converse with my brother about, I was kind of not privy to. So I think I grew up quicker. I had more adult, like I say, keep saying, worries and thought processes that meant, I suppose it was a bit different in that respect.
Well, do you feel like that hindered or helped you?
That's a tough one. I've reflected on this a lot. It meant I was making sensible decisions, but at the cost. So there's some bonuses, financial bonuses. There's some, I guess financial is where it ends actually, in terms of sensible decisions. But I missed out on a lot of a social life, and I missed out on kind of normal late teenage, early adulthood things, because I was practically living the life of like a 45-year-old when all my friends were like 18, 19.
Oh man, that's really interesting. So as I asked the question, I kind of thought how, it could be both things at once. Like I'm sure it is. Most things are. We want to say like, was it good or bad, or was it help or hinder you? But like as I was asking, and I'm like, well, it probably, there's pros and cons. You can never go back and change it. But I think about this too, because I'm the youngest of 6, and so I grew up having a much more of a variety of what people were going through than my older siblings. And so when I talked to them, we really lived 2 completely different lives. Me and my oldest sister, so she's 13 years older than me. And even simple things like, being, having 6 kids and not having much money. She's just like, what do you mean you had cereal growing up? I'm like, what do you mean you didn't have cereal? Like, why was that a thing? She's like, anything I had to hide in my room. And so, two very different worlds. But one of the things that I would say was the benefit of being younger, and it sounds like, to some extent you had this as well, is my ability to learn and, I don't know exactly the benefit of being able to see people experience things and people watching, essentially, right? I watched all of my siblings at different stages and levels make decisions, and I could see the consequences from it. And it was from my perspective at the time, but still, like, and it's probably why I'm interviewing people right now, is because I'm even back then was just fascinated at how they made decisions and then seeing the outcomes. And I was able to take a lot of that, and just the way that my mind worked, I was able to learn from it and be like, oh, there's a lot past high school. I remember that was like one of the things. High school feels like everything, it's your world. And then you graduate and you're like, oh, now life begins. Like, you think that that's like the biggest thing, and then you graduate, and that's really when the majority of your life is going to be lived outside of high school, but you don't recognize that when you're in it. Yeah. Did you have, I mean, it sounds like you had those moments. And now as you're kind of older looking back, do you, what are the pieces that you appreciate from, you said you felt like a 45-year-old person living in a 19-year-old body. What were some of the pros and cons of that? Because there had to have been some really positive things too, right?
Yeah. The sensible stuff. I have quite kind of firm foundations for making decisions that a 19 or 20-year-old wouldn't typically make. But to pick up on what you said, I also was watching my peers make decisions, and I could see the consequences of their actions applying this much older person's mindset. So what I kind of got lost in was this black hole of judging, essentially judging their decisions as immature or immature, childish. And that, going back to something I said earlier, kind of meant that I was missing out on some formative experiences because they'll have learned from those experiences where I never experienced it, to have that kind of cold, hard, that was great, do it again, or that was rubbish, don't do it again. I was very much kind of watching from the outside. And the effect of that really was that in my early 20s, I just became so analytical of decisions. So your interest in decision making, my decision making was pretty poor and over analytical, and it was almost a curse actually that I was so conscious of the decisions other people were making, because I was half kind of fearful to make my own decisions, but also super critical of those decisions that other people were making. So there's pros and cons, right? This coin thing, there's two sides, two feelings will probably come up a lot in this conversation. The positive was that I had a kind of a sensible or a rational mindset around decision making, but there was also this kind of slightly over analytical side to it, that also came from observing other people's decisions and their decision making process. So good and bad.
So how did that, you talked about being very kind of entrepreneurial and doing, being your own boss. And so how did that convert into not just personal life, but, your business and your professional pursuits?
It came as a bit of a necessity, I think. And again, we can go deeper on this. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. Not always a good thing. That I felt so different. Okay, the negative is I felt so different. I felt I almost couldn't compete with my age group. I didn't feel I was necessarily good enough, or I couldn't relate to them. So I think as a coping mechanism to that, I made myself more independent and more of an island, and more like, I'm going to do this. So there was this drive to kind of prove myself and justify my decisions. And that led to businesses that I saw as my kind of way to freedom. My first few businesses, I wasn't particularly passionate about the content of them, but I wanted a kind of quick fix or a quick win to freedom. And so the positive of that was that I kind of was really focused and motivated and very driven to get them to succeed. But they were kind of surface level. They were kind of means goals rather than end goals. So there was quite a lot of untangling there in terms of like, why am I doing this? And, what do I want out of it? What's the ultimate goal? So entrepreneurship kind of presented itself as an alternative to the 9 to 5 that I was so desperate not to partake in, and not to be a part of.
Did you, it's kind of funny to think about this. I'm wondering if it was different for you, but growing up, the idea of entrepreneurship today is so very different than it was when I was growing up. So I born in mid 80s, 85. And so, I was growing up really in the 90s, and I don't remember, like, I look at my kids, like everything that I'm doing now, there was no outlet for, like, there was no Instagram. Like, I was always doing photos and videos, and I just didn't have anywhere to show them. I would show them to my family. I put them on CDs and, take them to school, but it was, there wasn't a way to kind of like entrepreneurship and your ability to even just start a business. I mean, the web was really just getting started. And so, like, the idea of entrepreneurship wasn't the same that it is now. And so we talk about it, and when we're talking, you're using the terms entrepreneurship, but I'm curious, is that how you talked about yourself in the time? Like, did you feel like, how did you kind of explain it? Or was it always, did you have that vocabulary? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I don't even really use that word now. The connotation for me is like Richard Branson, I think, is an entrepreneur, someone who's founded loads of businesses and is hugely successful. I suppose my default is like business owner or business founder.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's kind of what I suppose at the time described myself as. I owned a business, or I started a business. I think that's a phrase that more aligns to me, but only because of these kind of heady interpretation of the word entrepreneur, when probably people listening to this might be like, own it, say you're an entrepreneur, or something like that. Maybe it's like a self-consciousness thing, I don't know. Business owner really is the term that I suppose I veer towards.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, because I mean, at its heart, that, again, it goes back to like the duality of a lot of things. I think that the two kind of coexist. Like, you are a business owner and you could be an entrepreneur, but I agree with what you're saying. I feel like entrepreneur is like a heavy term, and it also, to me, connotes like this desire to amass large companies, like the next Facebook, or the like Walmart, and like these big brands, big things. But I don't think it has to, and I think that's where I think you and I kind of coexist in the sense that it doesn't always have to be bigger, larger, more money. It really, entrepreneurship, to me, and that's why it's hard. I think the phrase it's difficult to kind of have a universal meaning anymore, because it means, I don't know, maybe I need to find another term, but it's more of like, I think what you're going for, like business owner, like being able to create the life that you want by doing what you love, and craft a profession for yourself around that. I think still falls in entrepreneurship, but like you were saying, it's a loaded term that, when you say it, brings different things to mind for a lot of other people, and it's difficult. But yeah, and anyway, I had never thought of that until we were just kind of talking, but that wasn't really growing up. It was never a path, at least for me. Like, I never thought that was a possibility, but it sounds like early on you recognized, like, well, I don't fit into these traditional ways. Like me, I didn't kind of like wake up until I was in my late 20s. And then I'm like, I don't know about this whole, like, what did I choose is essentially what is me. Like, I lived the path that was set before me, and then I got to a point where I'm like, I don't even know if this is what I ever wanted. I'm not unhappy, but it's not the life that I wanted to create. And that shifted a lot of my actions, and set in motion complete mental rewrite. But for you, it sounds like really early on, you recognized traditional routes weren't gonna, help you get where you wanted to go. What was that like? What was the early like turning point when you really recognized you were gonna kind of pave your own path, so to speak?
That's a good question. This is one of the positives to thinking like someone much older than I was, that I think I was with that quite self-aware. But this kind of, I guess there was rumblings of this kind of dis-ease of where I was at. So I was perhaps realizing like, I haven't chosen this. I'm very much doing what's expected of me. And I'm trying hard to achieve in those areas that I perceive other people are expecting me to do well in. So there's already this rumbling of like, this isn't really me. This is already kind of grating a little bit. And that kind of also feeling like I wasn't really fitting in all bubbled up when I was at college. So 17, 18, we call college high school, I guess, not university, but college, 17, 18. I was really depressed. And the straw that broke the camel's back was this kind of feeling different, feeling out of place, not feeling like I was on my path. So that manifested as depression, and whether it was separate to the depression or part of, I developed symptoms congruent with chronic fatigue syndrome. So there were weeks and weeks where I could just hardly do anything. But still not at that point had I realized what had caused it. At that point, all I knew was that there had to be another way. And I lived in, going back to what you said about not being surrounded by business owners or entrepreneurship, and that just not being on your periphery when you were growing up. Same. Yeah. I didn't know anybody that had a business. Everybody that I knew and all their parents were, traditional professionals, doctors, lawyers, whatever. So I had to work out with this very limited frame of reference what the alternative could be. And that in its first iteration was studying my degree differently. So I studied with the Open University when all my friends were going off to university. So I was straddling. I was trying to do things differently, but still fit in with these constraints that I'd created. So I guess that period of time of really feeling depressed, suicidal, and just tired, just fatigued the whole time, that was what really started this thought process of my time is limited, my energy is limited. Here is how I'm going to make the most of it. And with more and more levels of awareness over the years, but I suppose that's where it started, and that's what changed in my mindset, I suppose.
That's powerful phrase. That's kind of a similar thing for me, is like recognizing, my time is limited, and I think is very much a motive. I mean, still to this day, I think every day, just like waking up and recognize, I know I say this a lot, like no one's guaranteed tomorrow. And we forget because we'll say phrases like, well, there's always tomorrow. And, putting things off, is, it feels, especially when you're younger, like our age, I think most people normally feel like there's a lot of time, which there is, but I think, again, this goes back to like duality. I kind of fluctuate between these two extremes where I feel like there's still, like, I have 2 or 3 more lives to live. Like, I don't think you realize when you're younger, you will live so long and become so many different things. Like I'm 36, and so I'm completely different now than I was at 20. Right. And then, but then before that, when I was at home, I feel like that's a different kind of life of who I was. And again, it's not like, I don't say these things with any emotional judgment behind it. It's just it's unjudgmental. Like, I was different, not good or bad, just different person, and had different background and way of life, and evolving into something else. I kind of forgot where I was going with that. My ADD brain kind of like catches things and then like goes off on tangents, and then I forget what we were talking about now.
Change and time. Thinking that we've got loads of time.
Yes,
but maybe
that's
not
right.
being that careful with our time.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things. Like when I talk to my parents, my parents are in their late 60s, early 70s, and so much of our conversations are more aligned than I think my peers aren't thinking about the same thing that my parents that are like, I want to leave, legacy, and they're starting to create things. And I've released 6 magazines in the last 6 years. I've put out a magazine every year. And in my mind, it's like, I'm not going to wait until I'm 70 to put out my life story. I want to put it out in so every magazine. So volume 35, just, I'm in the process of releasing, and it's on, the 35th year of my life. So that's what the volumes correspond to, like, and even right now, like this is season 36 when I record stuff. So everything revolves around, what I learned in that time, and I'm creating content on multiple different mediums around what it was like for that moment. Instead of when you're 70, looking back, it's like, oh, my 30s were wonderful. And then like when I'm in it in the moment, it's like, there's, you probably understand this, like when you're trying to, own a business and run things, like there's definitely like really horrible days, and where you're just crying in the shower, and it's like, I don't want to forget those because we gloss over them later on. And so I want to like record a lot of that stuff in real time, because that matters to people that come after me. Like I don't want to just be like, times are great. Times are hard. And like the hardship is kind of what you were speaking to before. They help you evolve into that other person. And you talked about not being able to experience those things when you were younger and be able to make those decisions because you're so analytical. And so I think like for me, recording those, I don't know, is like a big thing. Do you kind of find that you still, your mindset corresponds to a lot of things that are, people that are much, much older than you still now, not just when you were younger?
I experienced this weird moment where I was working with someone about, I guess, 18 months ago, a bit more. And I think where I was kind of decreasing in age and my age group were kind of increasing, we had this like amazing moment where I came home from working with this guy and I was like, I'm his age. And we had like an actual like peer-to-peer conversation that I was fully engaged with. So yeah, I've definitely come down a few years to meet my friendship group and my peers as they're kind of working out. And I don't say that in a derogatory way. I'm not talking like all of my friends are whatever, it's not derogatory at all. Everyone's on their own path. Everyone's learning different things at different points in time, and they know loads of stuff that I don't know, and will have had experiences that I was too kind of fearful to have. But yeah, I did have that kind of light bulb moment where I came home like, that was weird, but nice. So yeah, I suppose I'm kind of Benjamin Button coming down and experiencing more stuff that perhaps my age group experience.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I want to kind of shift and start talking about minimalism, because I know that you kind of talk about that a lot. I don't know that I've ever like necessarily said I was like a minimalist, and maybe you haven't either, but it's definitely my style. And when I like my like design aesthetic is definitely it's not what can I add, but like what can I take away? What's the least amount that I actually need? And that like overflows into a lot of parts of my life. But for you, what was what was that? Were you always kind of a minimalist, or always kind of had that mindset, or when did that kind of come about?
I always remember not liking carrying stuff and having kind of visual clutter. So I remember being really young and also kind of having to make decisions about what was important, what stuff was important. So I remember being really young and kind of playing on my single bed like it was a boat, pretending it was a boat, pretending that the carpet was water. And, I could only have in the boat what I could fit, essentially. So there was already, I guess, from a super young age, already this kind of awareness of like, but how much stuff do you actually want? And it could be, and again, I've spent so much time kind of introspecting, if that's a word, to think, okay, so what's possibly the kind of slightly negative, slightly irrational, slightly obsessive part of this? Perhaps it was a desire to control my environment. Perhaps those rumblings of kind of being dissatisfied, and ultimately, which came out as this kind of fatigue and depression, was the stuff element something that I could control in an environment where I didn't perceive I had any control over anything else. So maybe it was that, but actually over time, understanding the real value of minimalism, of only having what serves us and using it as a tool, has grown and grown and grown. And with every kind of passing decision when it comes to stuff and anchors, I become more focused on this idea of physical freedom. And so those initial feelings of like hating carrying stuff, like I don't have a bag, it can be something really trivial, as having a bag. If I can get my few things in my pockets, I'm happy. I don't want to carry a bag, I don't want to carry an umbrella. Feelings like that. Of course, it goes a lot deeper than that, but those feelings were there in a weird capacity at a really, really young age.
I have a question for you, because I just had I had this conversation with my parents. They're going through their own kind of like minimalist journey, or however you want to kind of explain it. My dad specifically is just like, he's kind of starting to identify as like a minimalist. I don't know that he's saying it that way, but he's just like, I want to get rid of everything. Like, they just painted all their walls in a house. He's like, don't put anything up. Like, I just want it. And I tried to, like, I was talking to my mom and was kind of saying, like, minimalism doesn't mean get rid of everything, but it means to be intentional about the things you have. And that could actually be quite a bit of stuff. If you have, for me, I don't think it's about having less. It's about having intention behind what you have. And I think the concept from when you hear about minimalism, the appearance or the perception is that it's get rid of everything and you don't need anything. And I'm trying to explain that there could be extremes to it. Just like there's hoarding, which is on the other end. I think there could be this, getting rid of everything, and then but you all have to learn your own balance. But for you, do you find needing to explain that? Because when I say minimalism, I think a lot of people think that you don't need a lot of stuff, and it's not that for me. Like, how about you? What's your feeling around that?
Yeah, completely agree. I always had these feelings of kind of not wanting to own very much. I hadn't really heard the term minimalism until I was kind of, I suppose, late teens, and had found the minimalists. And I was so kind of, I never spoke about my thoughts towards stuff, material possessions, until I had one of those long rambling conversations with a friend who said, like, what's your stuff with stuff? Because I was super like compulsive about it. Like, I was very much like, I don't want birthday presents, don't want Christmas presents. Even people, if my mum was like, oh, do you want this top? I'll just put it in a bag in your room. I'm like, no, do not put anything in my room. So yeah, I think on learning more about the term and then joining Facebook groups, predominantly trying to find other people that I could relate to and that could relate to me, there was 95% of posts were like confusing the aesthetic with the lifestyle, or in my mind, confusing the aesthetic with the lifestyle. So you'd have people like, which rug should I buy? I'm like, I don't, this is not what I understand minimalism to be about. So yeah, I think there's a lot of association with like you said, getting rid of everything without the mindfulness behind it, or the intentionality behind it. But I think mainly it's confused with an aesthetic. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting. That's true. It goes back to, I guess there's just, and to me, I just feel like there's no right or wrong to it, and we're explaining it. I think you and I have very similar feelings around what it means, but this is our perspective, and it doesn't. There's not right or wrong. It's like, this is what I've navigated in my life to be good for me and help me be me. But I don't care if someone else views it as the aesthetic. I don't care. Like, that's fine. I think some people get caught up in like, well, that's not what the term means. But like, in my mind, it's, words mean what they need to mean for you. And the idea is that they need to have a way like to communicate what's in your head to someone else. But that, it can be complex, especially with the English language. There's a lot of overlap, and to me, I kind of see that as a feature, not a bug. It's the fact that you need to take time and have a conversation with somebody to clarify and articulate. And a lot of times we're like, oh, we don't understand. It's a misunderstanding. We're on the wrong page, and it's like, that's a great opportunity to like discuss it. And there's probably some form of both sides that you can each kind of take away from. So that was a random little rant, but
No, I agree. For sure.
Yeah, it was just coming from our conversation. I have a really good question that I really like to ask people. I'm really big on habits. I think habits, more than anything else for me, it's when I want to become something or I want to achieve something. The way that I operate is I look at what habits do I want to start, or what do I need to continue. Great example is when I started my magazine. It all started by saying, I'm just going to work an hour a day every day until I finish this. It wasn't like I in the back of my head, I wanted to do it from 30 to 40, but at the end of the day, it was like, I'm just going to see if I like to do one. Right. And it was like, I don't know how long it's going to take. Maybe it'll take 2 years. Maybe it'll take 5. I don't know. But I'm going to just work every day, at least an hour a day. And that was the habit. And then I started doing, then it was like every year I publish one. And then I started doing, YouTube. And it's like every week I, try and put out a video. And so again, it goes back to like, I think habits kind of help you uncover where you want to go. You wake up, and I always have this long-term mindset with a short-term kind of execution. And so I'm like in the dirt kind of every day doing things. But, the mindset is all these things are to help you get to somewhere. So anyways, all that to say, I think habits are really important to creating the life that you really want. And so for you to get to where you are now, I'm really curious on what is one habit that you already had that was just part of you that helped you get here, and what's one habit that you had to learn?
I don't think I had a good habit prior to starting. I was winging it for a really long time, so had kind of tangible successes, but also was stressed and pretty unhealthy. So I can't honestly say that there was any kind of good habit that I was carrying through. The most important habit and practice now for me is meditation. It's completely revolutionized my way of thinking, my appreciation of life, how I connect with people, how I conduct myself, how I conduct my business. So it's probably something that you probably already do, and loads of other people listening to this will hear the same thing over and over again. I'm sure loads of people say it, but meditation has really reformed my mindset in a really positive way.
But so before we get to the one I guess that was the one you had to learn. That was the habit. Okay.
Yeah.
So for that, so this is another term that can go off on many different. What does meditation mean for you? What does that look like in your life?
It's utilizing the Headspace app and jumping onto a daily 20-minute guided session. My experience outside of the Headspace app of meditation is practically nil. I'm really reliant on that, and it would be a challenge to me to meditate without it. So yeah, that is what meditation looks like for me.
It's very interesting. For me, I want to share this just to share like perspectives. But one of the things that I learned that really helps me is going on walks and just being outside. And like, I know this sounds weird, but like the wind in my face, like feeling the wind. I live in a place that has like nice big trees. And so what I do is just a simple walk, deep breath. And I say the phrase, I'm alive right now. And then my eyes become like, I kind of come into this place where it's like, my eyes are like, this is real time. And my eyes are like cameras. And I'm very aware of like leaves that I'm seeing and, sounds that I'm hearing. And it's just this moment where it's becoming aware of living right now. And so it's as simple as just like getting up and walking outside, or, sometimes if I only have 5 minutes, until another meeting, for me, movement is really big. Like maybe it's my ADD, but I have to move to think. And I guess I have to move to not think, to like really, which isn't that true because I could do the same thing. Like if I take a bath, but I think it's that deep breath in is like the turning on for me, and just like, I'm alive right now. That phrase grounds me and gets me in the moment, and I could start like feeling and sensing what's happening right now and recognizing that this is the moment that I'm alive. Because a lot of times we worry and have anxiety about the future, and we get nostalgic and think about the past, and we forget that we can only live like right now. And so for me, that's meditation. I think nature, deep breaths. So yeah, it's I think different than what most people when they hear meditation. I think that a lot of times I think yoga or something else. But I think it could be really simple as that. So yeah, I wanted to kind of give that balance.
Yeah, I can completely relate to that. I suppose I term that mindfulness, but that's just the definition that I have. And I don't know why I think of them differently, except I think when I think meditation, I think Headspace. When I think mindfulness, I also have a dog, take her out twice a day. Those things that you've described, feeling the temperature or the sun or the wind on your skin. If I catch myself lost in thought, I'll think, what can I hear? And I'm almost straining my ears to notice what I can hear. So yeah, I can completely relate to what you've described there.
Well, so that's really interesting that you kind of broke them into mindfulness and meditation. Because to me, like I've always just combined them, but like, is it still like you still see them as two separate things? Even after like the conversation?
Well, no, not after talking about it like this. But I suppose for me, the limit of my practice is that Headspace and a guided meditation, like audio guided meditation, is meditation to me. If I think I'm going to meditate, it's because I'm going to sit down and I'm going to open Headspace. That's just the association I have. But I completely agree that what you described was meditative, even though I'd call that mindfulness. But I don't know. Yeah. I haven't really thought about it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I had neither until you kind of talked about it. I've always just blended the two and just felt like they overlap in my mind. But so what drove you then to say like I need to do this app, like I need to do meditation? Like because it sounds like you're probably always doing the mindfulness, like you had some sense of it, and then but at some point you felt like, yeah, this guided meditation fills what that doesn't. Like I definitely get how you like the difference between the two, because they are very different practices, and can have similar outcomes and some points different outcomes. But for you, what was the objective, like for saying like, oh, I should try this, or what was the turning point for that?
I think, and I may have alluded to earlier, there was this kind of switch where I had only got so far with business before getting burnt out and stressed, and I was kind of applying this kind of almost broken lack of self-care mindset and just trying to plug away and make something happen. And at the same sort of time where I was kind of learning to work with people and learning to actually slow down, meditation was one of those things that an ex-partner of mine had been like, you should do this, you should do this, and that's all I heard, just all the time. And because it came across like that, I was all barriers up, like, no, I'm not going to do it. I've had to learn to be less impatient. I've had to learn to kind of slow down. And so there was never any space for meditation. I couldn't sit still for 5 minutes. If I suppose that's where headspace came in, because if you told me to sit down and focus on my breath for 5 minutes, it would probably last about 20 seconds. But I needed, and still to a point, need that kind of guided talk through. So I guess it was this point at which I realized like I couldn't keep, I'd done my best from 17, 18, I'd done my best till about 25. And something was a bit amiss there. I was still really tired. I was stressed. I was just living on adrenaline. And so that was the next point in my journey where I thought, okay, something has to change here. And headspace, I suppose, in my own time was something that I kind of picked up and realized was something to commit to, a habit to build, a small amount of daily practice. The mindfulness has come later than that, I guess, as the meditation practice has become more effective. That has allowed a bit more space for the mindfulness, for those walks and that awareness.
I think that's a really good point to bring out, is the everything kind of built, like for better or for worse. The decisions we make and the actions we take bleed into other parts of our life. So like you're saying, by increasing the meditation actually increased not just the frequency probably of the mindfulness, but also just the awareness and like your ability to concentrate inside of it, as not just came to my mind, but it's probably true in other parts of your life. But I think again, this goes back to like, I'm really big on like blurring lines, and we think that doing the one thing is to reach this goal that we have, but we don't recognize the byproducts that come out of that by doing, because I think a lot of what you talk about meditation, I know this sounds really weird, but I think therapy has been some of that for me. When we talk about like navigating my mind, and there is like in my therapy sessions, it's weird to say, like, I hadn't really connected the two, but I don't know, to like, as we're talking, I made the connection of like, there is a meditative action that happens for me when I'm someone's helping me guide my thought process. And it's different than I think what most people think of. So anyways, I think this goes back to, again, how I think getting practices and creating habits, they bleed over into these other areas that could be, we don't recognize how they're helping, but they are. And the same can happen on the other side, where if we're doing things that aren't good, good is a loose term, like it's subjective, but things that are detracting from where we want to be. It's not just in that one area, they're in these other areas. And so I think that's important to kind of think about. I don't know, I've never really thought about that. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, a really simple example would be like sport, or going to the gym. Someone wants to go to the gym because they want to get super muscly, hench, whatever. But actually the idea of working out is, also helping our mental health. It's also helping our sleep. It's also, I think, the cogs are turning that make us go, actually, I used to want that McDonald's, but now I see it and I recognize I don't actually feel that good after it. So there's so many other, as you said, so many other areas that benefit from what could be even smaller than, some huge session at the gym. Just going for a walk, going for that meditative walk or mindfulness walk in the morning means that you're already not feeling stressed when you go into your first meeting, or you're better equipped to sit in traffic and not get annoyed. So many positives. I completely agree with what you said there.
Yeah. I have a few more questions because I don't want to take up too much more of your time. But first, I wanted to we didn't really talk about how we met through the Beams app, but I'm really curious and interested, because that is how I first met you, and just coming across your stuff and listening to you, just I don't even know how to explain it, but it's your energy, your thought process. Like, there's so many ways in which I heard it and just felt so connected with you, and felt like in tune with where you were going, and there's so much connection, and was excited to reach out and kind of start having conversations, and been really impressed from afar. And so it's really cool to kind of get to know you. But what do you want to share about your side of kind of connecting and using the app?
Yeah. Thank you for those kind words. Beams has been some weird twist of fate, amazing platform of amazing people. I was introduced to it through John Weaver, who worked on it, and I've just made so many amazing connections with like-minded people, people that I'm now talking to every day, even outside the app. I don't know how it's happened. I don't know whether Beams, as it grows, that I don't know whether you still keep attracting all these amazing minds. But the appeal of the platform, aside from the community, which is huge, and I love it for that, I suppose a part of my minimalist ideas kind of align with Zen Buddhism in general. And I love the kind of idea of impermanence, and that. Go on.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to explain for people who don't understand. Beams is micro podcasting, and so you have 90 seconds of audio content, and I think you can add some photos and stuff, but it's mostly turned around just being able to have simple little phrases or little thoughts, and then multiple people can comment, and that's the idea of the app, micro podcasting. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but just people are probably out going, what's Beams? Because it's still pretty new. It's been really cool.
Sorry, I missed that.
About no, you're good. Keep going.
I missed that important information. I love the idea of impermanence, and that kind of filtering into minimalism has helped with kind of sentimentality and a previous attachment to stuff. So the idea, I started a podcast during lockdown in the UK last year, and I was kind of turned off by the editing and the projection or the presentation, because I wasn't very good at it and I didn't enjoy it. So, and I just wanted to have conversations with people like we're having now.
Yep. That's how I started mine, by the way. It's exactly the same thing.
It was a funny time, but lots of good stuff has come out of it.
Agreed.
So Beams gave me the opportunity to have a conversation with people broadened my horizons. All of these things that I wanted to achieve through speaking to people on a podcast, which for me, I mean, it was super self-indulgent. I just wanted to speak to people that I didn't have the guts to ring up and have an hour conversation with. If I could say, oh, I'll come on the podcast, you know, they bite your hand off. I wanted those conversations, but without the admin, without the technical side of stuff, which, like I said, I wasn't very good at. So Beams enables me to have these conversations. There's no personal pressure for me having to edit stuff or make the sound quality better. It's literally just snippets. And it's, I've become more kind of mindful of this idea of the universe appearing in funny ways and presenting itself in funny ways. But Beams for me is just, I mean, I'm not affiliated, like this isn't an advert. Is just like my perfect app. Sponsored by Beams. I'm not sponsored by Beams. Genuinely, really, really love it.
Have you stayed using it? Do you use it daily, weekly? What's your cadence?
So I was spending hours on it, and I like to be mindful of my screen time and my phone time, my social media time. Most of my social media time does not add value to my life. I'm spending, lots of time on Instagram, for example, just flicking. So I have to be really intentional with Beams, and I hop on generally once a week now, and I will listen to all the additions to the Beams that I'm a part of and contribute, if and when. So yeah, weekly, yeah. And I have continued using it and still having and finding amazing new content.
Yeah. So from my side, I love it too. I pretty much this year stopped consuming hardly anything. And so I was using it a lot when I first came on it. But like you said, I met so many really incredible people. And like when I say met, I mean, you're the only person that I've like really talked to. Most other people I've listened to their Beams, like, I've met them by like, I heard them. They don't really know who I am. So that's kind of my life story in a nutshell. It's like, I meet a lot of people that have no idea who I am. But like you said, I think it's attracting really incredible, and I wouldn't even say like-minded people, because I try and there's so many different types of thinking, and I'm really big on, again, I only have my perspective, and the only way I'm going to be able to evolve is by getting different perspectives. And this app, it helps you find kind people that think completely different than you and that think like you. Like you can find both. But I really enjoy that concept of, again, kindness is huge for me. And so I think it attracts a lot of just genuinely nice people, open conversations, and broaching topics that I think a lot of people would be scared to talk about, and bringing that all together in like one ecosystem, I think has been really, 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 really cool. But honestly, I keep wanting to get back on it and produce on it and like consume it, but I don't know. I've kind of shifted into like a lot of creation this year. I've been doing a lot of work, and it's really hard for me, because I have a really busy life. It's hard to consume and produce. I think that it's always a balance, but I don't get on as much, but I do really enjoy the app. So there's another app that's kind of similar. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's called HiHo. It's a video version of it, and you have 5 minutes, but everything's threaded. And I really like that app too. I've met a lot of really incredible people. It's very similar groups of people, but it's a good one to check out. I can send you an invite, but so the Beams is just audio only, but HiHo it's like a Q&A app. So you get on, ask questions, and people can respond to it, and it has your face. And so it's very, very personal. And there's no like buttons or anything. It's like, if you like it, you have to reply with the video that just says, hey, I like this idea. And I think Beams is doing the same thing. I think there's this counterculture to what social media had created. And to me, I think that's, I wouldn't say minimalist, but I'd definitely say like there's an intentionality to the social media up and coming kind of areas, which I think both of these apps are something I could see being around and being prominent hopefully the next decade. I think that the outcome that they produce, I think, is really, really positive just in my time on them. So I think that's really one other thing that I wanted to ask you. This might seem like a weird question. I don't know. I ask weird questions. I say things that maybe people shouldn't say, but I wanted to talk to you about like your evolution for your style. Cause like that's one thing that I recognize, like looking, outside looking in, when I come across it, you just are genuinely super cool. Like the way just who you are and just like everything about you, you have a unique, cool style. And I'm curious at what has that evolution been like? Have you always been cool? You probably don't be like, you probably don't maybe see yourself that way, but you have like this really, maybe it's just like you being yourself, but the way that you, combine everything, just the way you talk, the way you dress, the photography that you do on Instagram, your beams, like there's just like this genuine factor that's it attracted me. Like it was very much like, this person's pretty rad. Like they know themselves, they know who they are, and they're comfortable with that. And I don't know, it's just cool. Like your style is awesome. Like how did you get to be so awesome? Let's ask that question.
Very kind of you to say. I definitely don't think of myself as cool. I don't think I fit. I don't know what it's like for you in America, but in the UK, there's like the style is what the mass adopts. So for example, the easiest example of that is sneakers. When the Adidas superstars came back into fashion, you would walk down the street and you'd see like everyone under 30 wearing the same pair of shoes. And a few years ago, there was a phase of black, white Vans, old schools, and everyone was wearing them. So I've never fitted into like aesthetically what I'm perhaps supposed to look like. But on a deeper level, I suppose the decisions I've made, and we talked about this a lot, the kind of feeling different, but also doing things my own way has meant that I've had a hell of a lot of time to think over the last few years, for good and bad. You can go down rabbit holes, but I've also had loads of my own time to try a million different things, and growing confidence in certain different things as well. So where my peers might be kind of in a 9-to-5, I know what that's like. I know what it's like to through my 8 months of doing it, to work a 9-to-5, and you're tired. By the time the weekend comes, I was like, oh god damn, I'm gonna make full use of this Saturday because it's mine. And then on Sunday I was absolutely exhausted from the week. Like I get that and I sympathize with that. I've had so much of a clear schedule and so much time that I've been non-negotiable with. Like I said, I've been able to try different stuff and work out what I like, and as I say again, kind of growing confidence in those areas. So I guess quite a lot of what people learn over a number of years, a decade, 2 decades, I've condensed into quite a short amount of time. And maybe that's where confidence comes across in certain areas. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think anyone's described me as cool before.
Well, I love I mean, you're obviously hitting on one of my big topics, which is like, because you were intentional with, and I think people like, the motto that I kind of have is like, live life intentionally. And the idea is that if you live intentionally, you can live 3 lives in 1 lifetime. And that kind of like sums up kind of how you created this style. And you said, you were able to condense it because it wasn't that you were like, okay, I need to be intentional with my style. It's just thinking. It's just being cognizant of what speaks to you, and leaning in, and like you said, trying a lot of things, trying a ton of things. People don't realize like how many failures isn't the right thing. It's not a failure to like try something on and it doesn't work. It's like, it's just attempts. Like you just need a bunch of attempts at a bunch of different things. And I loved that. I love that really came back to a lot of the stuff that I kind of like preach and am really big on. And that when you do that, and when you think about those things, it can condense, what takes most people that are maybe absent-minded about it. And again, I don't say any of these things in judgment. Like everyone's on their own path, like you said, but when you stick to something, you can condense that amount of work into a shorter amount of time by just, focusing on it. And I think that's how you created and crafted your own style. And that's what I would say for anyone else who's like, how do I get, I'm an artist, I want to like, or I'm a this or that. How do I create my own style? It's, again, millions of different attempts at something that helps you hone who you are. And so I really loved that response. I think that was beautiful. And I would definitely, obviously I did describe you as cool, but that was like the first thing, it's like, I don't know, that's what comes to my mind. But in closing, the last question that I like to ask people is, and we both are friends with Jonathan Weaver. And so like I interviewed him and came across his stuff. And it's funny because I've been asking this question, and then he had that whole book on just this one question, but it's, what would you tell your teenage self? And that's kind of how him and I got connected, is his Kickstarter work, and then interviewed him, and then he invited me to the beams. Anyways, the question is, what would you have this moment to sit down with yourself, your teenage self, and what would that conversation be like?
Importantly, it would be telling my teenage self not to believe that I can't do it. In short, that's, what my teenage self would say is, don't tell me I can't. What I know now is that I based my decisions on what I thought was acceptable based on the frame of reference that I had, which was really the commensurate opinions of like maybe 5 adults in my life. So to it's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult to word. To think for yourself and go with what you want to do. Don't suppress what in your heart you want to do. Is something that I would tell my teenage self for sure.
I like that a lot. And I would kind of adding to that to say, like, even if it's, quote unquote, gonna be wrong, like, lean in and do it, because it's all those wrongs that help you refine your model for how you make decisions. And so, like, don't be afraid of getting it wrong. I think that's one of the biggest things for me, is just recognizing that. I think that's what happens to most people. They get older and they get comfortable not getting things wrong. And it's, to me, I always lean into feeling uncomfortable and feeling awkward. Like, again, that we talked about that, I think before we started, I said, I just live in this like awkward space, and then embrace it, because like anything new that you're going to do is going to be in that awkward space. It's going to feel weird. And that feeling that you have, like, that's what I chase, is how can I do more of those things? Because it means that I'm, gaining that practice of always, to me, what it means to be young is to just like dive into that. So yeah, I think that was a great answer. Do you have any last comments, things that we didn't touch on, anything you want to add?
No, we've covered a lot of ground. I would love to, and you would as well, I'm sure, talk to anyone about minimalism and that breadth of definitions that we've alluded to, and that recognition of minimalism as a tool, and what it means to live intentionally. Anybody who wants to have a chat about that, I'm always up for that.
Yeah, that's what I reached out to you for, and that's how we had this conversation. I was really appreciative of you being open. Thank you so much.